All right, what's going on, guys? So welcome back to another video, and today what I want to do is dive into a color grade tutorial, just a breakdown of how I achieved this specific look. So I should mention I'm not a professional colorist, so everything I do can probably be tweaked a little bit to be a little bit more efficient, but I just want to break down how I achieved this look. I probably should have gone in and refined my node tree structure and whatnot just to make it a little bit simpler, but just bear with me on that. So without further ado, let's dive into DaVinci Resolve. The first thing I should mention is that we are working in a color managed timeline. So we're working with the color science of DaVinci YRGB, and then the timeline color space is DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and the output color space is Rec 709 Gamma 2.2, or you can do 2.4. It's totally up to you. So just make sure that your project settings are set to that in order to follow along. And then let's dive into the color page. So right off the bat, what we want to do is we want to open up our clips tab here so we can see all the clips in our timeline. So let's right click on the clip here, and then let's add into a new group. So I'm just going to name this tutorial. Just name it whatever best suits your project. And so then once we have that in a group, as you can see up top here, we have now 4 different tabs. So we have the clip tab here, we have the group pre-clip tab, and we have the group post-clip tab, and then we have the timeline tab. So we're not going to be working with the timeline tab at all. What we're going to do is we're going to start with our group pre-clip tab. And so this one, we're going to keep it nice and simple. We just want a singular node here, and we just want to drag and drop a color space transform into that node. So for input color space and input gamma, just set it up to whatever color space and gamma the clip was shot in camera. So for instance, I was using a Sony camera, so we're just going to do Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine, and then the input gamma is S-Log 3. And then the output color space, we want to set it to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then output gamma DaVinci Intermediate, because that's what our timeline is set to. I'm also going to change the tone mapping here to luminance mapping. I'm going to use a custom max input of 10,000 nits. And then what I'm going to do is go over to my group post clip. So here, let's just set up the node tree. So we got this serial node here, and then let's just create 3 parallel nodes afterwards. And then we'll do 4 serial nodes following that. So for the second last one here, we're just going to do another color space transform. So this is going to convert our footage from DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate into a Rec 709 image. So let's do DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, and then Rec 709, and then Gamma 2.2 or 2.4. Perfect. So now we got a much more usable image. It's now out of the log format, and so we can start with the look development and color grading. And so then for our last node here, I'm working on a Mac, and so when I export my footage, I find that there is a gamma shift because I'm not using a color calibrated monitor. So to compensate for that, we just got a little LUT just to allow you to view your footage for what it's actually going to look like upon exporting. So that's linked in the description. It's a completely free LUT that you can just download to use if you're using a Mac. If you're not using a Mac, then lucky you. So let's hop on into our clip level here. I just have the node tree set up as I made it. I just reset all of the nodes. So first things first, I want to start with my white balance. And what I want to do is, instead of using the tint and temperature sliders, I want to go over to my effects panel and I want to do chromatic adaptation. And I'm going to set the illuminant type as color temperature, and then the target illuminant type as color temperature as well. So I know that I shot these clips this clip at 5200 Kelvin, and so then we'll put that at 5200 Kelvin for now. What I want to do is I want to cool off my image a little bit. So I'm actually going to bring this up to about 5600 Kelvin. So that just, it'll cool off the image slightly. And then I also want to add a little bit of a green tint to it. I find a lot of the time shooting with Sony, there tends to be a bit of magenta hue to the footage. So I just want to get rid of that. And I'm going to add a decent amount of green tint. So we're going to bring that to negative 57. Next, what I want to do is I want to go over to my exposure node. So it's the top one here in the parallel nodes. And for this, I'm going to be using my HDR wheels. And we're going to be playing around a decent amount. So bear with me, the exposure and contrast nodes, they're a little confusing, and I should have refined this a little bit more, but they end up working out in the end and creating a nice image. So what we're going to do is, like I said, use the HDR wheels. I'm going to bring my dark value down quite a bit here to about negative 1.16. And then the shadows, I also want to bring down to about negative 0.4. The light value, again, I'm going to bring down to negative 0.46. And the highlights, I also want to bring down a lot, like a lot. We're going to bring this down to about negative 2.55. I'm also going to do something funky, which, again, this probably should just be in the contrast adjustment, but I'm going to go over to my primary color wheels and we're just going to play around with the lift and the gain a little bit. So I'm going to bring down my lift to about negative 0.03, and then I want to bring my gain up to 1.16. Now it gets interesting. So we're going to hop down to our curve node down below, and what I want to do is just introduce a bit of a contrast curve here. Let's enable our editable splines because they really help in the process of creating a beautiful S-curve. Add a control point. Let's click on the control point in the shadows here. It's looking good. Before, after, that adds a lot of contrast. That's more than we're really wanting, but we're going to compensate for it in the additional contrast node. So I'm going to leave it at that. With, actually I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pop on up to the contrast node here. This one's going to be a little different. So we're going to right click on the node and then go down to the composite mode. And then we're going to select luminosity. So the reason we're doing this is that we want to strictly manipulate the brightness values. So we don't want to influence the hue or the saturation at all. So we're just looking to control our brightness. So we're going to use our primary wheels. We're going to use the lift, gamma, gain. Lift will be primarily the shadows. Gamma will be more the midtones, and gain will be more of the highlights. Obviously there's some crossover in all of these, but just kind of break it down in that sense there. So I'm actually going to be getting rid of quite a bit of the contrast, but we're going to be feeding back into it later on in the tutorial. So just stick around and let me work a little bit of so-called magic. So let's grab our lift wheel first, and I'm going to bring that up, really bringing the shadows up significantly. So I'm going to bring it up to 0.18. And then with my gamma, I want to bring that down to negative 0.02. And then with my gain wheel, I'm just going to bring that down a ton. We're going to bring that down all the way down to 0.41. And then let's also bring down the offset. So that's going to control the global amount to about 23.8 or 7. So yeah, as you can see, we got rid of a lot of the contrast, which might seem very counterintuitive, but just, you know, we're doing what we're doing. There's probably a better way, but it is what it is. What we're going to do next is we're going to get funky. So we're going to hop on over to our group post clip area. And with our first node, we're actually going to use our little friend, the film look creator. So this is the first time I've actually tried using the DaVinci Resolve Film Look Creator plugin. I've tried using Dehancer in the past, so it's kind of fun playing around with it. All right, so what we're going to do under presets, we're just going to select clean slate here. We want to manipulate all of the settings ourselves. Right off the bat, going into the film look here, we want to bring up this film look blend to about 0.65. And then instead of cinematic, I want to select Rochester. It's a pretty close emulation to Kodak 2383, which is used in a lot of Hollywood productions. And then I'm just going to leave the skin bias as is here. So let's scroll down to our color settings. And right off the bat, I'm going to use the exposure slider to bump it up to 0.35. And then I also want to introduce a little contrast. And remember, the adjustments we're making here are impacting the entire timeline and all of the clips that are within this group. So it's not clip specific. Just keep that in mind. So you don't want to go too overboard when you're doing these adjustments in case it doesn't suit one of the other clips that are in your timeline. And then with the highlights, I'm going to bring that down almost all the way to about 0.047. I'm going to leave the fade at 0, and I'm going to bring the white balance down actually to about 6,130-ish. And then the tint I'm also going to bring down a little bit more to about -6. And so what I found from playing around with this is that the subtractive saturation slider and the richness slider work really well hand in hand. So you can reduce one while increasing the other. And I find it really provides that nice color density that you oftentimes see in film. So let's work with our subtractive saturation. Let's bring that down to about 0.767 there. So that's brought out quite a bit of the saturation from our image. But then what we want to do is we want to increase our richness slider. We're going to bring it up to about 1.327 there. And another cool feature is having the ability to easily apply a bleach bypass effect with simply a slider. So you don't necessarily want to add too much of it because it can be pretty intense unless that's the look you're going for. But in this scenario, we're not looking to have just a strictly bleach bypass look. But it does add a nice little element to our overall look. So just subtle, just 0.109, and that'll do the trick. Then we do want to add some split toning. So this is a nice color contrast, color separation that adds some depth to our image by either cooling down the shadows and warming up the highlights or vice versa. You can choose whatever color split you want, but typically you'd want to have cooler shadows and warmer highlights. But I'm going to do something a little funky, so I'm just going to right now increase the overall amount to 100%, and then I'm going to play around with the hue angle. So I think I found that I was going for about 114, which as you can see looks really weird. You got the green sky and then kind of more magenta-y shadows, which typically you wouldn't want, but we're just gonna use that, and we're gonna adjust the pivot slightly, just ever so slightly, and then bring the amount down by quite a lot because otherwise it's very overpowering and it doesn't look that great when it's super strong, I find. And again, just play around with whatever split toning you want for your image. It's really a personal preference and it depends on what you're going for. Next, I want to add in some halation. So we'll enable that. And let's increase the amount up to 0.511 here. The radius I'm going to bring up to 4.42. And then the hue, I want to make it more on the red side of things. So I'm going to slide it all the way to 0. And then I want to add some bloom as well. So let's enable that. And I'm going to decrease the amount to about 0.31. And then I'm going to leave the radius at 10 there. And then the only other thing that I want to add is grain. So I'm going to enable the grain. You always want to enable the grain. I don't know what that was, but anyway, so we're going to bring down the amount quite a bit to 0.093. And then the size I want to leave as is, the softness as is, saturation as is. So already it's starting to look quite a bit better from that one contrast node. So if you didn't believe me, stick around, wait till the end to see what you get. Sounds weird, but anyways. So let's just label our node here. We'll create film look. Then what we're going to do is we're going to dive into these 3 parallel nodes here. So the first one is going to be dealing with contrast. And we are going to be using the custom curves once again, our very good friend here. And we want to get our image looking a little bit nicer. So introduce a little bit of that sexy, sweet pop of contrast. All right, so that's what we ended with, as you can see. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to add in our own split toning. I know it seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's what I did, so things I do tend to not make sense, it seems. But we're going to use our custom curves again, and we just need to expand this quite a bit. And let's unlink all of the curves. We're going to be working with them individually, and I want to introduce some more cool tones to the shadows and a little bit more of warmth to the highlights. Not too much though. We want to keep it very subtle. So let's expand our custom curves. I want to just quickly take a sample of where the skin is landing at. We want to also turn off our editable splines because for this, we don't need them. So let's start with our shadows here. I want to first work with my blue curve, and I want to introduce some blue into my shadows. Next, let's go over to the green, and I'm going to add a control point down here as well, actually. And then we're going to introduce some green, not as much. We want to make this kind of more of a teal-y look to our shadows, but let's leave that there. And then let's go to our highlights. So I want to go to my red curve, and with the highlights, you want to be a little mindful. You don't want a super heavy hand. So I'm going to put a control point there, bring this up a bit. So yeah, let's just keep it at about there. And then I also want to go in with my blue curve, and I want to add a control point where this red one is here, and then add another control point here and just bring it down. And in our third parallel node here, I want to just play around with the midtones and highlights a little bit. Just give them a little adjusting. Mids, and we're going to name this mid/highs, just high. And we're going to work with our primary color wheels. And let's do our gamma and our gain here. So what I want to do is just bring my gamma up to 0.02, and then just bring my gain down the tiniest bit to 0.99. And the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to add a quick little glow node here. So we'll just go to the node here that's adjacent to our color space transform, and we're just going to search in the effects panel, glow, and just drag and drop the DaVinci Resolve glow effect. And what I want to do is I want to decrease my shine threshold all the way, decrease the spread all the way, and let's scroll down. And for the composite mode, I want to do soft light. And what we want to do now is, because it doesn't look great, we want to adjust our global blend. So I want to bring that down to about 0.124. Perfect. So we got the glow node. I'm actually just going to delete this node. We don't need it. We can get rid of it. Let's move things over here. Clean it up. So for my look adjustment nodes, I'm actually just going to show you the settings that I ended up using for them, just to save us some time here. So let's pop on into our first look adjustment node. So this is off, this is on, and we started with our primary color wheels, working with initially the lift, basically introducing some cool tones to our shadows. These are the values that I set it to. Then with our gamma, we're just introducing a little bit of warmth back into the image, as you can see. With our gain, we introduced quite a bit of warmth back in. And Then popping on over to our log wheels, we focus strictly on the shadows here. So just adding a slight amount of warmth back in to try to regain a touch of balance. Then popping on over to our HDR wheels, just focused on the light wheel here, bringing up the X value to 0.01, brought that Y value up to 0.1 as well. And you can see before and after just cools it down quite a bit. But then moving on to our look adjustment number 2, because I couldn't get it right in one node, so I created a parallel node to kind of compensate and add to our look. So let's toggle that on here. So hopping into our primary color wheels to start, let's go to the lift, gamma, and gain. As you can see, added a little bit more cool tones to the shadows, brought a little bit more warmth back to the mid-tones with the gamma, and then with the gain and the highlights, brought a little bit of warmth back as well. Let's go over to our log wheels. This added quite a bit more warmth back into our shadows, just to balance things out. And then popping on over to our HDR tab, we adjusted most things here. So with the dark wheel to start, as you can see, brought the X value down to negative 0.02, Y value up to 0.01, and then the X value of the shadows brought up to 0.01, Y value of the shadows down to negative 0.01. And then the X value of the light wheel brought up to 0.01, Y value of the light wheel brought up to 0.02, and that's it for that. And then what I did was I just played around with the RGB mixer a little bit. It's one of those tools that I actually neglect to use pretty much all the time, even though it does serve quite a bit of purpose. So I just increased the green value in the green output to 1.01, and in the blue output, I increased the blue value to 1.03. Next, I want to go into my color adjustment node here. So first things first, I went into my custom curves and my hue versus saturation. Right off the bat, I wanted to increase the saturation of the hat. I really like the color of it, but it wasn't popping enough for me, and I needed to do something about it. So I want to bring this up to, just want to keep it subtle. Yeah, so I just brought it up to there, so 1.08 for the saturation level. Then going over to the color slice tab, what I want to do is adjust my red values. I want to bring the hue down to, let's bring it to negative 1.68 here. So let's look at the vector scope. I want to change the hue value of the skin tone to 0.178. And then I'm also going to change the yellow value to 0.314. And then we're going to leave everything else as is there. So those are the simple color adjustments that we made here. So you can see before, after, just takes away some of the green in our image and introduces a little bit more warm, kind of burnt orange tones, which I kind of prefer. What I want to do is I want to go over to my saturation node up here. So with this node, we're going to adjust saturation in a different way. We're not going to use the saturation slider or anything like that. I want to right click on my saturation node and I want to go down to my color space, and let's select HSV as our color space. So that stands for hue, saturation, and value. And value typically is like almost interchangeable with brightness. So what we want to do is, because this is a saturation node, we want to go to our channels and we want to uncheck channels 1 and 3. So we only want channels 2 to be selected. And the reason for that is because with an HSV color space, channel 2 is directly linked to saturation. And when we're adjusting our saturation, we don't want to also be manipulating the hue or the brightness values. We want to strictly adjust the saturation in as filmic of a way as possible to, again, create that color density and the richness that we're looking to achieve. So within the primary color wheels, I want to work with my gamma and gain strictly. I don't want to touch the lift. I don't want to touch the offset. It'll just make your image look really funky and it's not going to work nicely. So let's bring the gamma down quite a bit. So we're going to bring it down to negative 0.11. Then we're going to bring the gain up quite a bit as well to 1.24. So right now it's looking pretty desaturated. I might come back and readjust it depending on how things are looking. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop on over to my custom curves tab here. And with this, it's super cool. You have a lot of ability to manipulate your image here because you can basically just put control points where you want and then adjust it to the saturation level that is fitting for your image. So let's start by just attaching a couple control points onto the line here. And a little goes a long way when you're adjusting the saturation on the curves level here. So right now, this is kind of more the blues. So we can increase the saturation a little bit if we want. And then what I want to do is I want to really focus on the hat. So that value's up here. So just, yeah, play around with it till you get a look that you like. Obviously, you might want a more saturated image. You might want an even more desaturated image. Totally up to you. Yeah, whatever really floats your boat. But for this instance, I wanted something that's a little bit more on the desaturated level. And then these next adjustments are completely optional. All right, so the first optional adjustment that I did was create a compound node with some power window adjustments. So specifically for the face and the background. So with the power window on the face, I just went in and used an ellipse here, just put it over the desired area. I ensured that the softness was pretty high there. Bring that down there, make it more elliptical. There we go. Then what I want to do is I just want to bring the gain value in our primary color wheels up. So I'm just going to bring that up to 1.04. So let's see before and after. I just want to bring a little bit more emphasis onto the face where the light's hitting. It just would looking a little flat, so I think that adds a nice little subtle pop to that. And then for the background one, I just want to use a gradient here. And then I'm just going to increase that and then bring it back here. I just want less emphasis to be placed on the background and more emphasis to be placed on the subject. So with this one, I'm going to then go to the primary color wheels. Just bring the gamma down to about -0.02. Again, this is optional, but I think it adds a nice little touch to our image. So let's see before and after. See, as you can see, it's like, it really makes the subject, in my opinion, stand out a little bit more. So next, what I wanted to do was just adjust the shadow levels on our subject's face ever so slightly. And to do that, what I wanted to do is just select that specific area. So I used our 3D qualifier tool just to then go in on our subject's face and select that area in particular. So then just wanted to get rid of that. All right, and so then I'm just going to play around with my light exposure value and my dark exposure value. So I'm going to bring the light exposure value down to -0.13. Dark exposure, I'm going to bring that down to -0.09 here. And then the only other one was, I used the qualifier, the 3D qualifier tool to then make a selection of the hat, just because I wanted to adjust the saturation. I want to increase the saturation of the hat here. Don't want to focus on the face, just the hat here. I just used the hue versus saturation curve just to bring the saturation of the hat up here. So as you can see before and after, just adds a nice richness and color pop to the hat. Yeah, just a little subtle detail that you can or can't, that you can choose to use or you don't have to. But I've just been playing around with the 3D qualifier, and I feel like it's a very powerful tool that I actually didn't know about until a couple weeks ago. So just something that I've kind of added to my arsenal and just thought I would share with you guys. Anyway, so that is our final image there. So as you can see, we got our log image, we have our Rec 709, and now we have our fully graded image. And so if you stuck around here till the end of this tutorial, what I wanted to ask you guys is, would you guys benefit from me providing this power grade as a free download? If it's something of interest, just drop a comment, just let me know. And if there's enough interest, then I will include this as a link in the description as a free download for this power grade. Obviously, this color grading tutorial, it wasn't perfect, but it got a look that I was pretty happy with. If you guys found this beneficial, just let me know and I will continue to make color grading tutorials, hopefully that are a little bit more condensed and time sensitive. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.